Year 2025 turned out to be a really strong year for anime overall. We had several big titles that performed well for different reasons. Lots of new anime adaptations that were received well as some sequels, but when I look back at everything I watched in 2025, there was one anime that stayed on my mind more than the rest. Not because it was the most popular, but because it felt the most refreshing. That anime is Kowloon Generic Romance, made by Mayuzuki Jun. If you haven't seen it yet, don't worry. I'll keep this video spoiler free and refer only to the first episode. Also, I want to be clear, calling Kowloon Generic Romance my favorite anime of 2025, it doesn't mean I think other shows were bad or undeserving. It just means that out of everything I watched, this one interested me the most and gave me the fewest reasons to complain once it was over. And in this video I want to talk about how this anime ended up being my anime of the year, as well as try to convince you to give it a chance if you haven't seen it yet. Enjoy! There are numerous reasons why I chose this specific title, but if I were to name the biggest one, it would be the atmosphere. The story of Kowloon Generic Romance takes place in, well, Kowloon, which is based on the real so-called Kowloon, the walled city in Hong Kong, which was evicted and demolished back in 1992. Now I don't want to get too much into history details here, but the main reason why it was demolished and evicted was because that it served as a base and home to many illegal businesses, drug dealers and illegal immigrants. I want you to know that because in anime Kowloon is nothing like that. It is often romanticized, referred to as nostalgic, and succeeds to create that nostalgic atmosphere when characters talk about it. It never really feels like a dangerous place to live in, when in reality it was a very dangerous and unhealthy place. Meaning that since it's completely different in anime, you don't really have to know the full history of the IRL Kowloon to fully enjoy the show. And I am a great example of that because when I decided to watch this anime for the first time, I literally knew nothing about Kowloon. Also, don't get scared by the title, I mean the romance part. I don't know about you, but I don't like the romance genre that much. It usually feels very cliche and I tend to skip anime focused on romance, but there is a reason I watched this one because yes, it is actually a romance. It's not just part of the title. And first of all, the characters are all adults, which automatically takes us to the second of all, this isn't a school drama. Which takes us to the third of all, we won't spend 20 plus episodes watching these two act all lovely-dovely with each other and get embarrassed every time they touch each other or look at each other, only to finally confess to each other and act the exact same way but now as a couple. You get the idea, right? The usual romance stuff. So thank God this time we won't have to go through this scenario again, only to again end up with the same outcome as always. Instead, the first episode of Kowloon Generic Romance is pretty straightforward with us and already shows a great difference between our generic idea of romance. And you can already tell the tone is different starting with the opening scene, because from the very beginning it doesn't ease you in. There is no long setup, no introductions explaining who's who or how everyone knows each other. You are dropped straight into action, the characters already have shared history, habits, and some established relationships, and the show trusts you to catch up, but not through tons of monologues. That alone already sets it apart from the most romance anime series, because in my experience with romance anime it always starts with a high school boy or girl, usually waking up late for school, everything is chaotic, and while they are getting ready, in the background there's a monologue of the main character explaining, hey look, it's my sister or brother, those are my parents and I'm late for school. You know, the usual. While in Kowloon, during the opening scene, the main character, Reiko, doesn't even say a word. We observe her doing her morning routine, there is a TV playing in the background and we just observe. We don't know who that is, what's going on, what is that giant sphere in the air for, but it's already kinda intriguing. And the first thing that caught my eyes, apart from that giant whatever in the air, was the art style. Just look at it yourself. It really does look like an old school anime, but more modern, if that makes sense. There is even that so-called piss filter, which just screams I was made in the 90s. But my point is that in general this anime is beautiful to look at, and the same goes for characters that don't look alike, and you can clearly tell them apart not just by their hair color. And as I have mentioned, this is a story focused entirely on adults. No school, no students, the characters have jobs, routines, established relationships, everything is already there, but most importantly their conversations feel natural. As if you just listen to a bunch of friends that have known each other for a long while, rather than characters that presumably know each other for a long time but act as if they see each other for the first time, and during their very first on-screen interaction they randomly say stuff like, hey, remember how I met you there 5 years ago and then we became best friends? Just to let us viewers know that hey, these two are best friends and they have known each other for a very long time. And I'm not saying that Kowloon never uses cheap tricks like that, but when it does, it just feels very natural and you won't even pay that much attention to it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against the idea of schools in anime, otherwise I would have to skip almost every other show, but it is nice to not be stuck in school for once and follow actual adults. Anyway, let's go back to the topic. After that opening scene, we follow Reiko on her way to work, walking down the street, listening to TV news in the background, greeting with characters we don't know yet, that whatever is still there in the air and no one really minds it. In general, Kowloon feels alive. Then Reiko finally arrives at the company building she works for, which is Wongloi Realty Company, and as she is about to check in, she gets pushed aside by her co-worker, Kudo, who checks in before her, which ultimately leads to Reiko checking in late. Now this Kudo guy at first gives off some asshole vibes, followed by his voice actor, which is known for playing characters that give off such vibes. But that's only momentarily. Now in generic romance we would have a monologue from Reiko explaining who Kudo is, how she sees him, and basically would receive a brief description of this character. However, here she says nothing and reacts to what happened only in the next scene. She confronts Kudo about cutting in front of her, which he doesn't seem concerned about at first, but ultimately invites Reiko for lunch as compensation. Now I may be pushing it a little, but I really like how that scene played out, because as mentioned, normally this scene would serve as a mean to introduce Kudo and give us some information about him, which otherwise we wouldn't have a chance to know yet, like his age, maybe something about his family, or that he's always late for work because of his situation at home. Instead, here it feels natural. Kudo did something inappropriate, got confronted about it, and offers Reiko lunch as his way to say sorry. We didn't really learn anything about him through some monologue, but we can kinda guess what his character is about through his actions, and I really like it about that anime in general, because it's not that single scene. This anime is full of such scenes, which at first feel random and don't serve much purpose, but are wisely used to highlight some characters' traits or show the relationship in not some obvious way. It may feel like nothing special, but when you watch it, it clearly makes the entire experience more enjoyable. Now after lunch they go back to work and continue their tasks while talking with each other in between, and that's when that giant sphere in the air, named Generic Terra, is commented on by Reiko and Kudo for the very first time. But rather than straight up clarifying what that is to us viewers, they just briefly complain about it and move on to another topic, throwing some most classic comments like they are using our tax money to build shit like that, which might be the most common complaint used around the world. And that's basically how a great part of the very first episodes plays out. We simply follow Reiko and Kudo through their day, working, taking breaks, having these small, casual conversations in between. Nothing really that big or dramatic happens. As a viewer, you're mostly just observing their routine, but at the same time there is this quiet feeling that something is very off. That feeling becomes much clearer towards the end of the episode. After work, Reiko and Kudo stop by a local bar, a place Kudo visits often, which you can tell by the way he talks with the bartender. While for Reiko it's her very first time here. However, as they are leaving the bar, the waiter casually comments that he's glad Kudo brought his girlfriend again. Reiko is obviously confused by that comment, and when she brings it up to Kudo, both of them kinda laugh it off as a simple misunderstanding. Kudo doesn't make much of it, so neither does Reiko, and the scene ends in a way that almost convinces you to do the same, to just let it go. But the next day makes it clear that it wasn't that simple. Reiko arrives at the office and finds Kudo sleeping on the couch. Trying to wake him up, she jokingly imitates their boss, this guy here. And it actually works. Kudo reacts without thinking. He wakes up, sees Reiko, and suddenly kisses her. Almost immediately he realizes something is wrong. Pushes her away, says sorry, and brushes it off as a mistake, saying he confused her with someone else before quickly leaving. For Kudo, that's the end of it. But for Reiko, it clearly isn't. The day continues and Reiko is still bothered by what happened. She can't just brush it off as a misunderstanding like Kudo did. And when Kudo leaves the office early, Reiko starts cleaning his messy desk, and that's when she stumbles upon a photo. A picture of Kudo and Reiko taken by that bartender to celebrate their engagement. And that's where the episode ends. Well, now, even though I obviously know what happens next, it is quite a setup, wouldn't you say so? And before you think to yourself that I skipped a lot of scenes from the first episode, yes, I did. And on purpose. My point wasn't to recap the entire first episode, but to focus on those most important moments and highlight how this anime works, and why it feels different. And I did it mostly for those of you who've never watched it, because now even though you more or less know what happens in the first episode, you will still have fun watching it and learning some of things on your own that I have not talked about. Also, the first episode can be a bit misleading. For some reason it has a lot of fan service compared to the rest of the series, with some noticeably suggestive framing, to say the least. It's never really like that again after the first episode, so if fanservice bothers you, then don't worry, next episodes are more chill. But overall, the first episode greatly captures that casual atmosphere. Everything feels so slow, chill, everyone is having fun, yet there is that uneasy feeling which never leaves you. And that feeling proves right by the end of the episode, obviously. but with each episode that feeling becomes stronger. One of the best aspects of Kowloon generic romance is how patient it is. Many of the questions it introduces remain unanswered for a long time, but it doesn't feel frustrating. With each episode you gain just enough information to form your own theories, and slowly build an understanding of what's really going on. Sometimes even before the story literally spells it out for you, but you will still feel uncertain before it does. And it makes it even more interesting by showing you different perspectives. In the first episode, we only get to experience the story through Reiko's eyes. And even though she's the main character, you will very often get to experience perspectives of other characters. And that's where it really gets fun. Because the cast is really unique, so every time you switch perspective, you will really feel the difference in narrative, and how each character reacts to what's going on in Kowloon. And even though the ending of the first episode makes it clear that, well, something is definitely wrong and Reiko has no idea what's going on, that casual atmosphere present in the first episode doesn't vanish after that. I want to avoid spoilers, so I can't really give you straight examples, but you will see and hear on your own. Yes, hear. Because the music, to which you probably had a chance to listen to in the background during this video, plays a huge role. Nothing can top a good soundtrack when used appropriately. Look at this scene. Just two coworkers, talking on the rooftop, just chilling, having a smoke, and you can hear that track in the background. Combined with a beautiful art style, that very scene, which feels like nothing special, suddenly becomes special. And some of you may ask, okay, but what's the catch? Is there any? Well, it depends on how you look at it. While I'll praise this anime a lot and obviously recommend it, there is one issue with it. Small or big, it depends on you. The manga is still ongoing. That means the anime ending and some of its scenes are not canon. However, that is not exactly true because the anime was created with the author involvement, implying that the ending and all the scenes leading to it that were not part of the manga were approved by her. Obviously they are still not canon, but at least there was some kind of control. Now, I wasn't really bothered by the fact that manga was still ongoing. To be honest, I learned about it after finishing the anime, but by the end you can clearly tell that some characters are not as developed as the others, and their screen time was obviously cut short. At the same time, the story feels complete upon finishing it. Obviously, it's impossible to say more without any spoilers, so I'll stop here and encourage you to judge the anime ending by yourself, but all I can say is that the anime could have easily been 24 episodes long. After all, the manga was around 90 chapters long when the anime premiered, and it finished only after 13 episodes. So obviously a lot was skipped, and too bad they went with only 13 episodes. At the end of the day, this is still a great watch, and once again I encourage you to give it a go if you haven't yet. I mean, aren't you interested to find out why Reiko doesn't remember her engagement day? And what's really going on in Kowloon? When I look back at everything I've mentioned, the atmosphere, the way information is held back, the rare focus on adult characters, and that constant uneasy feeling while witnessing all the casual moments, that's really why Kowloon generic romance ended up as my favorite anime that came out in 2025. It's a show that doesn't use cheap tricks, doesn't over-explain itself, and doesn't try to be different. It just naturally becomes different. And for me, that approach worked really well. If you have already seen it, I would honestly love to know how you felt about it, especially about the ending and the overall vibe. Did it work for you or did it feel a bit too slow? And if you don't agree with me calling this anime the best one that came out last year, then what was yours? I'm looking forward to find out. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe and drop a like. Thank you all for watching and I will see you all in the next one. Bye bye.